or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Ron Bickelman. For the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 15th and 16th issues of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Mangione admits to killing CEO. 28-year-old pleads guilty to federal stalking charges in executive's death. Luigi Mangione, whose cold-blooded killing of an insurance executive at a Manhattan sidewalk rattled the nation and struck fear into corporate America, pleaded guilty Friday to 2 federal stalking charges in the death of United Healthcare leader Brian Thompson. On the morning of December 4th, 2024, I shot Mr. Thompson in Manhattan and he died. Mangione solemnly told the judge during a court hearing. Mangione, wearing a tan jail garb, told the judge that he spent years enduring severe pain, including a broken back, and witnessed others with similar experiences. He said, after learning of an investor conference, he emailed United Healthcare, posing it as an investor at a firm managing more than $50 million in assets, to request information about it. Unlike my previous interactions with insurers, I received an immediate response within an hour, Mangione said. U.S. District Court Margaret Gannett told Mangione faces up to life in prison at his sentencing, which she set for December. Jamie McDonald, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said after Friday's hearing that his office intended to seek the maximum penalty, saying Mangione committed the crime in order to draw public attention to his dislike of certain businesses. No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder, McDonald said. Thompson's family sat in the front row of the courtroom during the hearing. Today, the guilty plea marks an important step toward justice for Brian and our family, the family said after the hearing. The plea resolves one criminal case against Mangione, but could upend or delay a separate state murder case that is set scheduled to go to trial in early September. Though the state and federal charges aren't the same, his legal team contends that he can't be tried twice for the same offense known as double jeopardy. Mangione's legal team is seeking to dismiss the related state charges in light of Friday's plea. A spokesman for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office said it was prepared to litigate the issue. Mangione has accepted full responsibility for the death of Brian Thompson. A lawyer for Mangione, Karen Friedman, in Affilio said, after becoming frustrated with the healthcare and insurance bureaucracy, he had to navigate to receive treatment. Mangione believed that the system had failed him and destroyed his life. She said the killing of Thompson, 50 years old, came as other top executives in United Healthcare Group, parent of the largest U.S. health insurer, were getting ready for an investor presentation inside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Prosecutors said Mangione, 28, meticulously planned the killing for months, researching Thompson and tracking his whereabouts. At 6:45 a.m. local time that day, masked Mangione shot Thompson outside the hotel, West 54th Street, prosecutors said. The words deny, delay, and dispose were written on the side of some of the shell casings found at the scene, according to a complaint. They were quickly interpreted to be a variation of a rallying cry adopted by some people angry with the health insurance industry. Mangione fled uptown on an electric bicycle, then jumped onto a cab and took him to the George Washington Bridge terminal. After a frantic day-long manhunt, he was arrested at McDonald's in Altoona, PA. Law enforcement officials found inside his backpack a pistol equipped with a silencer and a notebook, authorities said. One entry said the target is insurance because it checks every box, and another described an intent to whack an insurance chief executive at the investor conference, according to the federal complaint. For United Healthcare, where Thompson was a widely liked, affable executive who rose through the ranks and led its insurance unit. The loss left colleagues mourning at the same time they felt under attack. The company said on Friday it was grateful to law enforcement for bringing Brian's murder to justice. The company increased security at the Minneapolis area headquarters. Health insurance leaders who had rarely seen themselves as high-profile targets for violence quickly hired bodyguards and canceled public appearances while adding new layers of online threat assessment. The killing prompted companies across industries to reassess how they protect top executives. It also helped unleash an online backlash against the health insurance industry, particularly authorization requirements that can block patients' access to costly procedures and drugs. The industry has more recently sought to counter consumer angst through efforts that companies still would ease the process for approving treatments. U.S. urges Apple not to buy Chinese chips. Trump administration doesn't want Apple to buy memory chips from China. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said in an interview Apple might not do so anyway. Insatiable demand for the computer memory among companies building artificial intelligence data centers has led to a shortage of critical components, skyrocketing prices for what's available. The higher costs are causing Apple and other makers of consumer electronics to raise product prices significantly. To help alleviate the supply crunch, Apple is looking at Chinese manufacturers. Trump administration is not in favor of that, Lutnick said in an interview after touring Apple manufacturing facility in Houston. Apple has been testing memory chips made by Chinese companies CXMT and Yangtze Memory Technologies, a prelude to potentially including them in Apple devices sold in China, according to people familiar with its efforts. Laptop makers HP and Acer have started using memory chips from CXMT in devices sold outside the U.S. U.S. government rules require American companies to secure a license before sharing product information with CXMT and YMTC. The Chinese chip makers would need such information if they were to make customized chips for Apple, but Apple is free to buy off-the-shelf parts from the companies and to negotiate prices with them. Apple's chief operating officer Sabi Khan declined to confirm Apple was testing Chinese memory chips in an interview Thursday, but he said he was given the magnitude of supply shortage. Said that given the magnitude of supply shortage, we have to look at all options. While Apple customizes many components inside iPhones, Khan said there isn't a lot of customization for memory, alluding to the possibility that commodity Chinese memory chips could be used. Components highlighted a new point of tension between the Trump administration and Apple, even as the two sides sought to promote their cooperation at Thursday's factory tour. As the U.S. largest maker of devices, Apple can play an outside role in reshoring manufacturing. Reshoring semiconductor manufacturing is a top priority for President Trump, whose policies have been already secured hundreds of billions of dollars of investments in this key sector. White House spokesman Kush Desai said the Trump administration remains focused on delivering more investments and jobs for the American people while safeguarding our national security. Idaho-based Micron Technology has asked the Trump administration not to let Apple use Chinese chips, arguing that such a move would harm the domestic production and hurt the White House goal of onshoring semiconductor manufacturing. U.S. investment plans have given it leverage in talks with the administration and lawmakers, putting Trump in the middle of a lobbying battle between two of the largest U.S. businesses. Senators from states where memory chip makers have promised to expand, including New York, Indiana, and Idaho, wrote a letter to Apple chief executive Tim Cook in late July, urging Apple not to work with the Chinese companies. Wall Street Journal Biles had asked the administration for help to deal with the shortage, but there are few easy policy options to address the supply squeeze when it comes to more than a year to build new. When it takes more than a year to build new capacity, the Trump administration has used the threat of higher tariffs to push companies to reshore supply chains. Companies such as Apple have in turn promised to invest large sums domestically, though they have offered little clarity on how much they are dedicating to new manufacturing initiatives as opposed to already planning spending for existing U.S. operations. The administration had won deals for Intel to make some of Apple's chips and a commitment from Apple to make all the cover glass for iPhones and Apple Watches in the U.S. Even so, Ludnick, who is spearheading the administration's plan to increase domestic chip making, said the administration continued to press Apple to bring more production to the U.S. Relentlessly more and more, he said, describing the pressure. They've built their supply chains on low-cost labor, and now they need to build a supply chain on advanced manufacturing. Can Apple do it? Of course they can. War with Iran hinges on who blinks first. Senior Trump administration officials have doubled down on the economic pressure in the fight with Iran, making lower oil prices a top war aim and vowing financial sanctions that would force Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Nevertheless, Iran late Thursday attacked 2 U.S. Arab Emirates ships in the strait. Emirati officials said, an indication that Tehran is impervious to the more economic sanctions and is willing to make military initiatives even when Trump appears reluctant to return to a shooting war. President Trump's relying more on the Navy's blockade of Iranian ports as financial pressure on Tehran. Iran's leaders are trying to show they won't relent and will keep the strait closed until energy prices force the U.S. to back off, analysts said. Tehran has drawn a simple lesson from every game of chicken with Washington. Have your nerve long enough and Americans swerves first, said Ali Vaz, International Crisis Group's Deputy Program Director for the Middle East in North Africa. Washington this week indicated it would slap new restrictions on Iran's economy in coming days. The efforts by both sides to inflict economic damage puts them further from the off-ramp they appeared to reach the deal in June. The agreement set only financial rewards for Tehran if it reopened the strait and entered serious negotiations on the nuclear program. Vice President J.D. Vance spelled out the administration's priorities Thursday, telling Fox News that keeping energy prices down was goal number one. Trump, a Republican, began the war declaring that his goal was to force Iran into a deal and it would prevent it from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. The White House has become increasingly pessimistic in recent weeks about achieving a final nuclear settlement with Tehran. Instead, Trump has focused on squeezing Iran's battered economy so the regime has a deal to open the waterway that would let him declare victory on the war and moving on, U.S. officials said. For Iran, control over Hormuz enables it to make demands on the U.S. without having to concede anything over its core nuclear program. Iranian officials believe they have time on their side and have expanded their demands for reopening Hormuz. Tehran has said the U.S. needs to end the war, lift its blockade, and provide relief from sanctions and freezes on Iranian clash. The central question of the conflict has now become which side blinks first under economic pressure. The words of war ramped up Friday after we finished defeating Iran, which is very badly defeated. Pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States, Trump said in a speech in New York. In response, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazim Gharbadi said on X, the Strait of Hormuz is Iranian, will remain Iranian. This strait will only be closed and open when under Iran's command. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Thursday the Navy could sustain the blockade on Iran indefinitely. U.S. officials said the military is preparing to replace the U.S. Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in the region with the USS George Washington amid concerns over the living conditions on the Lincoln. Iran has used force to keep the commercial vessels out of the strait. Analysts said Tehran's ability to escalate military works harder for Washington to bring out concessions with economic pressure alone. The attack on ships affiliated with UAE's Abu Dhabi National Oil Company brought the total to 6 in August. The UAE, a major oil exporter, has pushed to get shipments quietly through Hormuz despite Iran's chokehold. The waterway remains largely closed, though most ships unwilling to make the cross without a go ahead from Iran. those that do use the route administered by Tehran. Ship tracking data from Kepler says that just 13 vessels crossed Thursday, a waterway that routinely handled more than 130 before the war. 9 of them took the route administered by Iran. Traffic this month has been slowed from July, with an average of 26 vessels cross the strait every day. International oil prices have recently oscillated under the $90 a barrel level as flows from the strait remain curtailed. The latest tensions between the U.S. and Iran over the status of the waterway will keep the risk of another crisis and another closure relatively high through the rest of 2026, analysts at the Eurasia Group consulting firm wrote a note to clients. In U.S. news, Leavitt perfected the art of defending Trump. Press secretary was his willing scene partner for an underlying loyalist. Where's Caroline? Where's my superstar? It was late August and President Trump was in the White House briefing room, his eyes searching for his beloved press secretary. After a few moments, Caroline Leavitt emerged from the press offices, taking her place at the president's side. Is this the largest crowd you've ever seen? Trump asked her, gesturing to the horde of reporters who's crowded in the press conference. Yes, Leavitt replied. This is definitely the most packed briefing, and I think all of you would agree, I think, is why we need to build a ballroom. The president smiled, beaming as if she'd just read his mind. So it went between the president and Leavitt, the first press secretary of his administration, Trump's second longest serving and his fifth overall. She was his willing scene partner, underlying loyalist, and ardent defender who spoke at times as if she and Trump shared some kind of telepathic connection. She was 27 when she took the job after racing up the ranks of the Trump world, first as a White House intern during Trump 1, and later as his spokesperson for his third presidential campaign. Now, less than 2 years into her tenure, Leavitt is calling it quits. I have felt in my heart that I cannot be the best mom for my 2 young children deserve while devoting the constant time, energy, and attention required of the White House press secretary, Leavitt said on social media. Trump said he understood and respected her decision and that Leavitt would remain one of the top outside advisors. Leavitt, the youngest press secretary in history and the first to be pregnant in her role, never anticipated leaving the White House early, but she made the decision to leave shortly after returning from maternity leave for her second child, Viviana, according to a person familiar with the matter. Her husband, New Hampshire businessman Nicholas Riccio, who is about 32 years her senior, was bearing the brunt of caring for the infant and 2-year-old toddler Nico. The White House also began turning from the offense to defense with the midterms just 3 months away, and Leavitt felt she would be more helpful from the outside. She wanted to leave on a high note, the person said, before burning out. While there is often turnover in administration around the 2-year mark, this has been a particularly challenging summer, administration officials said. The Iran war continues to drag on, weighing down poll numbers and morale inside the White House. The midterm elections might wipe out the 2024 GOP gains. Officials in the White House are bracing for potential investigation should Democrats win back control of the House. In recent weeks, White House counsel David Washington and Press Secretary Abigail Jackson have also announced plans to depart. Leavitt, known by her colleagues for putting in long hours, she became pregnant with her first child during the 2024 presidential campaign. She eschewed traditional maternity leave to keep working for Trump. I told her to take a month, Chris LaChavita said, the campaign's co-manager, calling her. She said, no, I'm in no hurry. I need 10 days. She was back to work after just a few days, returning on the day would-be assassin opened fire on Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. When she took a longer leave this summer, a rotating cast of cabinet officials such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent held briefings instead. Trump kept asking aides when she would return. When Leavitt walked through the doors at the Oval Office to assume her duties, the president looked at her and said, half-jokingly, "Thank God you're back." When Levitt steps down in 2 weeks, she'll leave behind a press operation reimagined in the mega media landscape. The communications office wrestled control of the press, pulled away from the White House Correspondents Association, and closed off access to senior press offices in the West Wing. But even as they subpoenaed reporters from the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, Trump and Levitt showed up to both sides. The White House Correspondents Association dinners this year, after all, her boss was a loyal newspaper subscriber and broadcast viewer, and at times their best source. Budovich said that while the administration believed the media to be biased, Levitt could meet unfair media hostility with aggression, but would recognize there's a relationship that must be managed and maintained. Trump put in more face time with the media than Levitt ever did, and when she appeared in the briefing ballroom, she was his enforcer. Levitt somehow appeared to be simultaneously grin and glare as she boasted the administration's accomplishments and steadfastly defended the president, even when he wasn't telling the truth. For her first briefing, Levitt asserted without evidence that 50 million taxpayers' dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza, a performance that drew comparisons to Sean Spicer's assertions about Trump's exaggerated inauguration crowd size. She was fact-checked for President Trump's big, beautiful bill and couldn't add to the deficit, and the tariffs were a tax for consumers. After Trump posted a racist video depicting the Obamas as apes, Levitt initially defended the president. Please stop the fake outrage. Report on something today that actually matters to the American people, Trump said. The White House later deleted the post. Spicer, Trump's first press secretary, admitted he was a bit jealous of Levitt, who he told the Washington Post last year. Perhaps that's because Levitt has something to do with previous Trump spokesmen. Had something no previous Trump spokesperson did. A political conscience fermented exclusively during the GOP's mega era. A decade ago, as a college student, Levitt was already planning op-eds decrying the press as frankly crooked, unjust, unfair, and sometimes just plain old false. She was a native to a land foreign to her predecessors. It wasn't merely that she spoke fluent Trump, it was her first language. Continuing along in U.S. news, Trump downplays concerns about Carrier. Amid new reports, the president says the tour hasn't been nearly long enough. President Trump played down concerns about the living conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier that has been deployed for more than 250 days, suggested that the lengthy naval deployment in the Middle East was not nearly long enough. When a reporter later Friday brought up service members' families' concerns regarding conditions on board the Lincoln, Trump replied, "No, they're not. The ship is moving right now or very shortly, and is being replaced with another vessel. Another similar ship. The U.S. military is preparing to replace the USS Abraham Lincoln with the USS George Washington as part of the scheduled Middle East deployment. The Lincoln has been in the region for nearly 9 months, the previous second aircraft carrier to face an extended deployment under Trump. In May, the USS Gerald R. Ford came home after 11 months, becoming the longest deployed aircraft carrier since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And when asked if the naval deployment lasted too long, Trump said it hadn't gone nearly on long enough. This comment appeared to be a nod to the continuing naval blockade, which Trump is willing to eventually put pressure on Iran economically and convince it to surrender its nuclear program. Aides have convinced Trump, at least for now, to give the tactic more time to work before resuming military strikes. The conditions on the aircraft carrier have received attention from members of Congress amid reports about the lack of food, personal supplies, and plumbing backups, and broader concerns about the sailors' mental health. The person who went overboard the Lincoln in early August but was rescued, according to a U.S. official. The aircraft carrier hasn't made a port call in 200 days, setting a record for consecutive days at sea, according to Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut. A port call allows the crew to resupply, rest, and regroup during standard deployment Press Secretary Pete Hesketh has described the concerns as completely misrepresentative. In a post on X on Friday, he said the brave sailors of that state group are very proud of their tough and historic mission. The Lincoln began its scheduled deployment in November and was redirected in the Middle East, and its embarked aircraft was instrumental in the U.S. Operation's Epic Fury bombing campaign, and the ship has since participated in the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. The carrier's rotation out of the Middle East was scheduled before the concerns about the living conditions were widely reported. In an August 12th letter to Hesketh, the acting Secretary of State, Huang Cho Blumenthal, wrote that the Lincoln's extended deployment raises broader questions about the Navy's ability and sustainability generate carrier forces while preserving service member well-being, maintenance schedules, fleet readiness, and the capacity to respond to future contingencies. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 25 minutes after the hour. Now let's look at an article in the Exchange. The quiet venture capitalist behind the record Lakers deal. Joshua Kushner is less in the public eye than his brother Jared, but his VC firm is behind some of the biggest tech companies today. Jared Kushner, husband of Ivanka Trump, and broker of attempts at Middle East peace and developer of the vacation real estate, is used to being in the spotlight. This week, his younger brother upstaged him. He bought the LA Lakers. Joshua Kushner's $12.5 billion deal to acquire the team with Bob Iger, Disney senior advisor and former CEO, marks another chapter in the improbable story of one of the family's American journey. Their tale encompasses the immigrant triumph of the Holocaust surviving grandparents, the shame of the father's prison sentence, and the vindication of one son's Trumpian accent. Now, if the Lakers deal is approved, the Kushner will lay claim to one of the crown jewels of American sports and its prized courtside real estate. Can it be long before Jared and Ivanka are spotted in the front row with Leonardo DiCaprio and David Geffen admiring Luka Doncic's step-back jumper? As insiders recount it, the deal sounds deceptively simple. Kushner and Iger, who is also an advisor in the Kushner venture firm Thrive Capital, had been bargaining for the NBA expansion franchise in Las Vegas. As the price climbed the climb, they pivoted and looked at established teams instead. They ended up making Lakers owner Mark Walter a $12.5 billion offer for the franchise he bought 14 months earlier at $10 billion. They called him up and just asked, a person close to Kushner explained, as he had made an offer on a house. Walter, a billionaire founder of the Guggenheim Partners, is facing federal investigation at the firm into private credit lending and a liquidity crunch. He accepted the offer within 72 hours. It's interesting for someone who's so private to buy the freaking Lakers, said Ellie Jacobs, a media and communications advisor. Joshua Kushner has said he likes iconic franchises that are immune to technological disruption. Basketball team would seem more of a trophy than a natural fit in the Kushner portfolio of investments in artificial intelligence and other transformative technologies. But in addition to being big stakes in the companies like OpenAI, Stripe, and SpaceX, Kushner said his core investment thesis also prizes iconic franchises that will be immune from technological disruption. On that score, the Lakers fit the bill. Kushner has owned minority stakes in other sports teams, including the Memphis Grizzlies and Miami Heat. He would have to sell off the Heat stake to own the Lakers. Thrive brought a stake in San Francisco Giants earlier this year and was set to invest billions in the new commercial venture run by FIFA before the plan collapsed after the stirring intense backlash in the soccer world. It's a big move. Joel Cutler, co-founder of General Kastler said in an early Kushner-Backner set of the Lakers deal. Cutler, 68, recalls taking a meeting with Kushner at the Cambridge, Massachusetts office where the younger man was still a student at Harvard with a budding interest in tech. We were going to talk for like a half hour. We ended up talking for hours and hours, Cutler recalled. They did not discuss tech. Cutler's mom had just died, and he was distraught. I'm old enough to be his father. And he's sitting there talking to me like a friend, Cutler said. It turns out empathy can be particularly useful in a venture capital world where star founders often get to choose their investor and not the other way around. I've been fortunate to work with many great investors. There is none I'd recommend more highly than Josh. Sam Altman, OpenAI chief executive, posted on X in 2024 after Kushner fought to restore him following a boardroom coup. Other allies include Peter Thiel, a Thrive investor, actor turned tech pro Ashton Kutcher, Indian oil magnate Mukesh Ambani, and KKR and Company co-founder Henry Kravis. Kravis and Ambani joined with Eager to acquire a stake in Thrive in 2023. Valuing the venture firm at $5.3 billion. That raised $10 billion. It's raised a $10 billion fund earlier this year. In 2016, Joel Klein, the former Justice Department official and New York City Schools chancellor and overtime board member of the News Corp, owner of Wall Street Journal, went to work and struck for Oscar Health, the startup Kushner founded. He was struck by the young man's thoughtfulness in an era of restless self-branding, his tenacity to shun attention and listen more than he spoke. He's a rare bird, Klein said. He's got some humility shtick, said Andrew Golden, former investment director of Princeton University's endowment and early Thrive backer. 80% of it's actually genuine, Golden said. Kushner and Iger, through spokesman, declined to comment. Jared Kushner didn't respond to requests for a comment. Comparisons of the brothers are inevitable. Like his older brother, Joshua, 41, is a modern Orthodox Jew who keeps kosher and observes the Sabbath. He and his wife, Charlie Kloss, the one-time Victoria's Secret angel, split time between New York and Miami, where they share a 15,000 square foot waterfront mansion with their 3 kids. Both brothers have shown a knack for attracting older titans and friends and mentors. In addition to Cutler and Eager, Joshua has bonded with former Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein and John Wickelried, the CEO of TPG Capital. In terms of style, Jared is buttoned-down Kushner. His hair is neatly parted, and he is known for skinny suits. Joshua Tumor is a fluffy whirl. He favors a sleek, casual look of the tech world in spite of their political differences. Joshua and Carly are avowedly liberal. The brothers remain close, according to those who know them. They've been imbibed with family legend and essence important, never shedding the immigrant's mentality. Their grandmother Ray escaped from a Jewish ghetto in what was then a Polish city of Novogrudok, by clawing their way through a tunnel. Her future husband Joseph survived in the nearby woods for nearly 3 years. They found the foothills in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where they joined the close-knit club of the Holocaust survivors who began building houses and then entire neighborhoods and formed post-war suburbs. The builders, as they became known in New Jersey, also included the Wilf family, whose descendants now own the Minnesota Vikings. Just like Donald Trump, also the son of bootstrapping developer, the Kushner boys talk of visiting building sites as children with their father, Charlie. As the elder son, Jared, was on track to enter the family business, which amassed thousands of the Jersey apartment units under Charlie's leadership. But his promotion was accelerated when Charlie was sent to prison in Alabama after pleading guilty to tax evasion and making a legal campaign contribution. As part of the investigation, it was revealed that Charlie had set up mail to his brother-in-law and prostitute brother-in-law with a prostitute to create blackmail material to try to scupper the state's investigation. The Cushman's paragons, their community were humiliated. Paragons of were humiliated. The Trump pardoned Charles Kushner in 2020, and then last year named him ambassador to France. Joshua started at Harvard in the fall of 2024 amidst the father's downfall. It also was around the same time another Harvard student, Mark Zuckerberg, founded the Facebook, soon dropping out of head of Silicon Valley. For a new generation, starting with an intent business from the dorm room became the rage. Joshua, who roomed with Black Fine's son Alexander, started Vostu, a social networking site for Latin American users. It sputtered, but eventually was rebirthed as an online gaming site with a sizable audience in Brazil. Co-founder and Hartford friend Mario Schlosser has been a collaborator ever since. At an event with students at Yeshiva University in 2017, Kushner acknowledged some of the mistakes he'd made at Vostu, including overhiring. He also credited his Jewish day school education, which he juggled religious education alongside with standard curriculum as useful training for the vigors of startups. Year after Goldman Sachs entered the Harvard Business School, while Jared was wrestling with the family business, the elder son had sold off many of Kushner's New Jersey holdings, and then in 2027 paid a record $1.8 billion for a Manhattan Tower office just before the financial crisis hit. Joshua, meanwhile, had been developing plans for Thrive. It was founded in 2009 with $5 million. In short, on the publicity, casting, and founders, it works with as true artists as shows of the stars of the show. Its early claim to fame was in 2012. A few days later, Facebook paid $1 billion for the app, doubling down on Thrive's money. Arguably, though, Thrive's key moment came a few years earlier when Cutler called his old friend Golden, who was running for Princeton's endowment at the time, and urged him to meet with a talented young prospect. At the time, Golden was trying to understand New York's nascent venture capital scene. He invited Joshua and a half dozen other folks to a Boston bar. Over successive meetings, Kushner's drive and ambition became evident. The Princeton Endowment's participation in Thrive's first institutional fund in 2011 helped put the firm on the map. The same year, Thrive joined a $50 million fundraising for Reddit, an internet startup where Altman was also an investor. Then there's the OpenAI biggest shareholders after SoftBank. Thrive is now the biggest biggest shareholders after SoftBank. The firm bet on the developer of the ChatGPT in 2023, a $29 billion valuation, and has continued to invest heavily in the business. OpenAI is now valued at $852 million. It's widely expected to go public next year, which would deliver a massive windfall for Thrive. It could be perilous. While many of its ventures capital peer have opted to spread their bets across both lending AI labs and OpenAI and Anthropic, Thrive is wedding to OpenAI. That has left the firm more exposed, particularly as Anthropic has pulled ahead in the AI race. Meanwhile, Thrive is rolling up accounting firms and other traditional businesses in hopes of injecting them with AI under a new effort called Thrive Holdings. Thrive Holdings raised $2 billion and a $12 billion valuation from outside investors this month. Then there's Thrive Eternal, the retro wing of Kushner's tech empire that has developed supposedly to AI-proof properties like the Lakers. With his sports franchise, the age-old temptation for the new billionaire offers is to believe they should make personnel decisions and draw plays. But those who know Kushner are convinced he will hang back and leave basketball to the pros, said Golden. That's not the way. That's not his way. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 40 minutes after the hour. Continuing in world news now, Chinese cargo ship takes Arctic shortcut. Shipping cargo through an Arctic shortcut never made economic sense until now. Climate change and war in the Middle East are flipping the map that keeps ships plying longer routes from Asia to Europe. A Chinese company on Saturday is starting its first regular cargo service to Europe through the Arctic waters, seeking to reap the benefits for a quicker travel time and less fuel use. The shipper, Sea Legend, will dispatch the Dubai Tower from Ningbo, China, to Felixstowe in the UK, on what it calls the Arctic Express, following a route along Russia's north coast. The voyage by the vessel, capable of carrying 1,740 20-foot containers, is the largest commercial step in the Arctic since Maersk container ship completed its route in 2018. Global warming is a big factor behind the new route, but it's not the only one. Nearly half of the Arctic region's summer ice, in the area 4 times the size of Texas, has melted over 5 decades, clearing a fairly reliable path in the summer. Meanwhile, high oil prices and attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea have made the traditional routes costlier and even more dangerous. Beyond that, Beijing has ambitions to play a role in the Arctic's future, lending a geopolitical dimension to the Chinese company's shipping route. Last year, Sea Legend completed a trial run from Asia to Europe in a record 20 days. It's roughly half the time of a voyage via Africa's Cape of Good Hope that many carriers now take because of the Red Sea's uncertainty. Fuel accounts for 70% or more of the cost while at sea, said Alan Murphy, a former Maersk analyst who runs research firm Sea Intelligence. Saving fuel by shortening the journey doesn't automatically make the route more profitable. Insurance premiums for the Arctic are up 40% higher than the Cape of Good Hope route, said Jonathan Steinberg, an economist at the credit insurer Coface. Sea Legend's Arctic vessels are relatively small, and even after warming, an icebreaker is still sometimes needed. But if the ship can go without the icebreaker, Coface said the Arctic route is now cheaper than the Cape of Good Hope voyage in some circumstances. It's estimated that the current oil price is around $90 a barrel. The cost of shipping liquid bulk such as liquefied natural gas could drop roughly 33% with the Cape of Good Hope route, while dry goods such as cereals would cost about 8% less. The route is only passable in the summer and fall. Sea Legend plans 8 voyages between August and late October before conditions get too icy. It's not the Suez Canal, but it's a significant number for the Arctic. It shows there's potential, said Malte Humbert, founder of the U.S.-based Arctic Institute. Even in the summer, ships have to navigate around the dangerous ice flows and deals with rapidly changing weather. By the end of the shipping season in October, the sky is dark most of the time. A Russian tanker suffered serious damage to its hull while sailing across the Arctic route, despite being assisted by an icebreaker, its insurer Alpha Strakvani said Thursday, adding that it paid roughly $650,000. Coface estimates 3.5 of the trade among East Asia and Europe. In North America, we'll be able to use the Arctic routes within the next 5 years, representing $64 billion in goods. Last summer, a record 23 cargo ships transited the Northern Sea route, which hugs Russia's north coast. That's tiny compared to the Suez Canal, where more than 30 ships transited daily. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 45 minutes after the hour. Let's take a look at sports. How to talk about the WNBA without yelling at each other. Why does a conversation about this league go from reasonable to crazy town in 60 seconds? Can we talk about the WNBA and stay friends? What is it about the basketball league that's turned into another toxic wrestling match in the culture wars? Why is it whenever you hear the term culture wars, it signals to pour a tall bourbon and leave the room? I'm not going to try to be cynical about anything besides the Mets and Jets. If we can get through this, we should at least try. Let's start here. What's the WNBA? What can it be? The world's preeminent women's basketball league filled with players performing at the highest level. Here's what it is: a daily parade of arguing from people who watch and care about the WNBA, as well as people who shouldn't watch a WNBA game as it's happening on the front lawn. Some of the debate is earnest, well-intentioned. Some of it's theater for recreational offended. To discuss this league is to leap into free air for all of combative feelings about politics, gender, biology, and race. You know exactly the sort of light fare sports fans crave in summer. Round and round it goes, turning the league radioactive. I feel like I should be typing this column while wearing a hazmat suit. I may need to open my emails with metal tongs for the next 48 hours. That's not even counting the ones saying, please stop the bike racing columns. Why does a conversation about the WA go from a reasonable to crazy town in 60 seconds? Has a basketball league turned into a relative to avoid at Thanksgiving? It doesn't need to be this way. WNBA has a positive story to tell about ratings and attendance growth, a new generation of players and fans. Hardly a night goes by without a few starry performance or a riveting game. Ton of talent. Four-time MVP A'ja Wilson, named for the Steely Dan song. Journal readers know. To wonder, Olivia Miles to Fever star Kelsey Mitchell to Mitchell's teammate Caitlin Clark. Clark is so popular that the Fever are a ratings behemoth. Their games upgraded to larger arenas. It wasn't hard to see Clark's impact on the recent salary breakthrough for players. He's been good for business, period. And yet Clark, too, has become a lightning rod, a pole she's never courted. She's been knocked around in the courts so much that politicians clamored to have it investigated by the Justice Department. She finds herself condemned for what she says, but not for what she doesn't say. She's feuded with referees. She gets accused of complaining and flopping too much, and she's dragged into every league drama, and somehow impressively she's kept her head screwed on straight enough to be the league's assist leader and third in scoring. A theory: Clark can take care of itself. Same for Sophie Cunningham, Clark's teammate, who reignited the trans sports dialogue after making comments in an ESPN profile about wanting to protect young girls in the locker room. Trans athletes in sports, if you haven't been following closely, is an increasingly settled issue. Olympic sports are now limited to biological females, as are all NCAA sports, and the Supreme Court has upheld the right of states to do the same. This hasn't stopped another go-around of the rodeo, partly because the policy for the WA remains unclear. It limits the league to women and it doesn't define women, but it also it's also because this topic is political gold and clickbait heaven, something discovered to great effect a couple of years ago. WNBA, which has never had a trans woman player, has convened a task force to look at the policy as a sensible move. That won't chill the opportunism, like a couple of attention-seeking ex-NBA players pledging to cry out for the league. It's as silly as it sounds. WA has become Woodstock for trolls. And the league can't dig its way out. Every time there's a momentum, there's self-inflicted setback. A league owner confronts fans whose politics she doesn't agree with. A black player hard fouls Cunningham, gets ejected, then posts white privilege. The Fever's coach doesn't back Cunningham vociferously enough, and it's cheered by the home crowd. Last act was enough to pull Clark off the sidelines. I hated that our fans booed her before the game, Clark said. That made me a little sick, to be honest. The old move isn't the easiest one. Tune out the noise, but it isn't easy. With so much talent, it feels like the league is punting away an unprecedented opportunity. WA needs executive and a player leadership to shift the focus from the off-court contentiousness to the on-court fun. Where's the commissioner? Where's the network partners and the sizzle PR machine? Where's the consistency with officiating? There's no shortage of suggestions. Never has a league been so barraged with so much unsolicited advice, my own guess included. It's really a Miss Planer's ball. Surely some of it's really a Miss Planer's ball. Surely some of this is the doldrums of late summer and the lack of sports stuff to yell about. Mid-August is a bleak desert. It's hard not to wonder if the current shouting will evaporate as soon as the NFL and college football arrive. I suspect it will. The parade will push on, the rancor will die down, and NBA can play basketball and get some relief. Caitlin Clark can be Caitlin Clark, and the fever will calm. We can all stay as friends. Continuing now in sports, what's wrong with Paul Skeens? Over his first 2 seasons in the majors, Paul Skeens' career was defined by making the impossible look mundane. From his highly anticipated debut at age 21, it only took him 2 months to be an all-star game starting pitcher. And by the end of his second season, he was the youngest Cy Young winner in 40 years. He wasn't just the best pitcher in the sport, he was on pace to be one of the greatest of all time. And despite being a dad bod that hardly made him look like an elite athlete, Skeens did it all by throwing hard, really hard. First pitch of his career was 101 miles an hour. That became the norm for Skeens, who broke out triple digits 100 times in his rookie campaign, nearly twice as many as any other start of that season, which is why his struggles this season are hard to understand. Over the past 10 starts, his ERA is completely baffling, 5.47. Before that stretch started, his highest ERA had been a 10-start span with 2.92. The Pirates have won just 3 of the last 16 games when he started and have dropped to last place in their division. But if that's one cue that begins to illuminate the greatest mystery of the 2026 baseball season, it's Skeens' velocity. When he was pulled after 5 innings in the 65 pitch against the Marlins on Tuesday night, his fastest pitch was 95.6 miles an hour. In fact, Skeens has thrown only 7 pitches faster than 98 miles per hour in his last 10 starts. In 6 of those games, he hasn't crossed 98 at all, which used to be his baseline. As a rookie, 82.6% of his fastballs were 98 miles per hour, and the number was still at 58.4% last season. This year, it's 8.3%. It's obvious the obvious suspect is an undiagnosed injury, even if Skeens said the All-Star break and him at the All-Star break that he wasn't hurt and that dip in velocity didn't bother him. 2021 study from Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine, however, showed the decreases in fastball velocity are an extremely common precursor to elbow problems that result in Tommy John surgery. Manager John Kelly insisted that his removal on Tuesday wasn't injury related, which might be even more alarming. The question now is whether Skeens is permanently broken. The Pirates entered the 2026 season desperate to end the longest postseason drought in the National League. They surpassed $100 million in opening day payroll for the first time in franchise history and called up baseball's top prospect, shortstop Connor Griffin, a week into the season. But if success was ever going to come for the Bucks, it would have to hinge on the generational ace. And in an era when pitchers are throwing harder than ever and suffering more career-altering injuries, Skeens appeared to be an exception, while others burned brightly for the sport for a short time while being betrayed by their bodies. He was a picture of consistency through the early days of his career. Now fans fear he will join the list of young flamethrowers who go through Tommy John rite of passage. The Los Angeles Dodgers' Therese Skubal underwent the procedure as a college freshman, and Red Sox pitcher Corbett Crochet in 2022. Meanwhile, Hunter Green, another star fireball for the NL Central, just had surgery for the second time on his career, and he's just 27 years old. But Skeens had survived his first two Major League seasons without a single serious injury. For the Pirates, alarm bells are ringing. Last season, Pittsburgh's pitching staff was fourth youngest in the National League, third best ERA. They figured they were the first a few offensive pieces away to return to the playoffs. A string of shrewd acquisitions then built a team that produces third most runs per game and in the National League. But the pitching staff built around Skeens is falling apart, and before they can fix their ace, the Pirates have to figure out what's going on with him. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 15th and 16th issues of the Wall Street Journal Weekend Edition. Every Monday at 7 a.m. Your reader has been Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings, 24 hours a day, of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service has broadcast almost 40 years of radio readings to those without sight. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,